Hi, everybody. We're on week 2, and this week we're going to be discussing the police officer interview. This is going to be our discussion. I find this a very interesting topic to go over, and I'm going to give you a little bit of the history on my interview. Much different than the interviews that are done today. So, to start with, my interview was in 1980, a long time ago. Many of you weren't even born during then. So 1980, I was brought into a hallway with about 25 people, and we stood in line. People went in and came out every 10 minutes. I was the only female in line, and I was fifth in line, which means that was where my position in the testing was. That's where my grade was. My grade was the highest without any service points. So the interview started. I was brought in, and it was an hour and 15 minutes long. Everybody else, as it said, was 10 minutes. And during that interview, I had 3 police commissioners ask me various questions. Some of them stick out very clearly to this day as being very illegal. For example, one was, did I plan on getting married? And if I choose to get married, how was I going to make my husband's breakfast? When I got that question, I kind of just chuckled and said, well, first of all, I would never marry somebody that didn't know how to make their own breakfast because I am not anybody's caregiver on that. So I said, okay, well, if he can't make his own, then he's going to have to find McDonald's. Then the second question I had from the female commissioner was, how do you plan on chasing a bank robber while you're pregnant? Are you planning on being pregnant? Do you planning on having children? And how are you going to fit that into work when you're working 12 to 8? Well, my son came along in 1985, and in 1985, I was fired for being pregnant, and I lost my mortgage, and I had to hire an attorney. Fast forward, within a couple days, I had the attorney. I got hired back within a matter of, a week or two. My girlfriend, who was also pregnant during the same time for the state police, did not get hired right back away and only got hired 2 weeks before she delivered her daughter, where they made her go out into all the hill towns in a cruiser with a gun belt and answer calls all on her own. And then she never got her time back. She was a detective lieutenant when she retired from the state police. So my daughter came along in 1989. In 1989, I was having coffee with my then sergeant, and a bank robbery came in. And I had been heading on my way to court, so I was wearing a suit because I was very pregnant at that time. I was like 7 months pregnant. So I responded to the bank robbery, got the person as I had him on the ground, and it was felony takedown, so my gun was out. I said, well, I guess this is how you do it. So questioning has changed over time. So let's talk about that. Let's talk, what does it take to be a police officer? What do you think it takes to be a police officer? What do you think should be part of that? I'm going to tell you right now, the vast majority of departments that I know are doing a psychological, as they should. So they're doing psychological. So there'll be testing. There's going to be general knowledge testing, and I'm going to be going over a little bit of that. Every department has their own criteria. Some are civil service, some are not. And then there's going to be an interview, and then there's going to be various screening procedures. So let's start with the questions you might see. People that might ask you, why are you leaving your current job? What is your ideal salary? And they ask that because, salaries are all over the place for police officers. So, for an example, I know of one department that has their police officers at $27 an hour and another that has them in the high 30s. So, if you are on a police department, you've gone through all the training, and that high-end police department that is making more money, are you going to transfer out? And a lot of officers were doing that. So now they've made it, if you want to go civil service transfer from one department to another, both departments have to agree. And as you can very well imagine, the departments that don't pay very much don't often say, yeah, go ahead. What would be your ideal work environment? For you, what would be your ideal work environment? When you go to work every day, you're there forever. You're 8 hours a day. They have invested in you and you have invested in them. What would you be looking for? And I can't tell you how many times people ask me, so what does a police officer do? Well, I think it was pretty clear on your last week's discussion that I said we are very much social workers. We are out there. We are public servants. We serve the public. So we answer calls of mental health, we answer calls of crime in progress, we handle death notifications, we handle accidents. We handle people at their very worst and we handle people at their very best. You go from, calm to everything going at 100 miles an hour. And I don't mean your car, I mean your pace. Um, and you have to know so many things. You need to know about motor vehicle. You need to know about all the criminal laws and how they change, and they change every single year. And then you're going to ask, what would be your least favorite part of it? What do you think the least favorite part of being a police officer would be? I can tell you for me is when I would get the calls I responded to almost all the unattended deaths for probably the first 8 years of my job on my shift, because it didn't bother me until it did bother me. But you would respond to those and you say that the smell is the worst part of being a police officer, I think, especially if somebody has been dead for a while. And then I think also the worst part is the grief that you see people go through. When you're going onto a department, what do you know about that department? If you plan on being there for 32 years, that's what I did. I did 32 years. That's the optimum time for a lot of departments, 32 years, 55 years old to retire. What do you know about that department? Is that a department you want to be? And how do you become a police officer? So, if you sit there and you look from day one, I knew what I wanted to be. That's very rare. I think that I'm one of seven. I think I'm the only one that knew what I wanted to be. And so I always set my goals for that. So everything I did had a motive. I took CPR and became an instructor because I wanted to put that on my resume, that I would be willing to teach people CPR and first aid. I became an EMT because I wanted to let them know that I was going to help people. I just continued to add little things to make myself more sellable to whoever was going to hire me. So there's a whole bunch of lot of questions that they're going to ask you, but one of the things you have to ask yourself, these are questions they may ask you, what does it take? Why are you qualified for this position? Why should we hire you over Johnny or Joanne or Michelle? I mean, why should we hire you? And what is your end game? One of the things I always ask people, because I had a lot of young police officers that would be assigned to me to train. I taught the rape school for many, many years. I'd say, where do you see yourself in 10 years? Where do you want to be? Well, it's an important question to ask. The next thing that we have on our topic is the screening procedures. Are they going to find out about a juvenile record? So if you're in Massachusetts, one of the things I want to tell you is everybody says if your record's sealed, it's sealed. Well, reality is, if I do a BOP or Board of Probation check on you in Massachusetts, I can go in there and I can see your juvenile record. I can't see what happened to it very often if it's been sealed, but I know you've been arrested. I know you've been charged, and that charge is out there floating somewhere. Vast majority of departments, I don't know anymore even look at that. But they used to have this catchy question they would ask all the time, and I don't know if they ask it now, but it is kind of a catchy question back then was, have you ever smoked marijuana? As I said, I knew from the day I was young that I wanted to be a police officer, so I knew I was ready to answer that question. Very much, my niece, who was a police officer, was asked that question, and she was honest about it, and she said yes. And they hired her. So they just want to see if you're going to pretty much lie about it. But what are the things that they're going to do? Are they going to check your neighbors? Well, I think that some do, some don't. Depends on what department. If you're FBI, they're going to go to your neighbors, your teachers, your mother, your father, your sisters, your brothers. Are going to go to everybody. But if it's a local police department, I've gone to neighbors. I've done background checks. I've gone to neighbors. I've gone to schools. But it depends on which one. The thing in Massachusetts, if you want to be a police officer, is the vast majority of them are civil service, but they're trying to get away from that. And truthfully, I think civil service is kind of like, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But civil service, if you go online into the mass.gov, you can pull that up and you can see what the exams are that are available. They're given every 2 years. You'll see that you have the environmental police one that was given. Application period's open now, and the exam date is on 10/29/2022. Firefighter, the exam period is open it closed 2 days ago. So you can see that there's Definitely a job coming up for environmental police, but all the others have already gone by the wayside. They do have it if you're in the military, you can make up exams, and the promotional exams are also done through civil service. I'm going to send you this page because I think this is very interesting. This is a physical ability test that has to be done. Massachusetts got in some pretty hot water because they made the test so hard for women, and they picked I'm not going to say picked. They picked muscles that men had and women didn't have particularly, and they played on that. And so, on one particular year, not one female candidate made it through the Boston, made it through it. It is now changed just a little because it was really quite ridiculous, and I know more people that didn't pass it than passed it, men and women. So if you go on this, you can see what the physical ability test is. We're going to go to the next assignment, which is your paper. And this paper really is, it hit home with me as I was, I looked at this yesterday, and this morning at 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up thinking about a young 2-year-old boy that was murdered, and I couldn't get a medical examiner to give me a cause of death when I knew that it was a homicide. And then I did have someone that would do it, but I had a DA that didn't bring it forward. And, I sat there and I can see this young 2-year-old lifeless body as I had to pull people off his body because it was a crime scene. And I thought, you don't realize the toxicity of where you work until you leave that. But I thought of him this morning because it was this time of year that it happened. And I thought of his mom and how she was handling all this. It was her boyfriend that had murdered him, and how he had gotten away with it. And those are the things in life that really get to your stresses. You work your hardest, and then it doesn't go forward. And that happens a lot in sexual assaults for many reasons. So I look at the stress level of police officers over the period of my 32 years. There was a very bad case that I had that ended me up with having to go to the hospital because I had a um, neck strain from it that I couldn't move my entire right side. It was a 3-month trial. That never happens, but it was a very bad case, and it was every single day. The stress you put on your family with this is unbelievable. But when we look at suicide in police, I want to say, you need to look. What causes stress? Poor management. It was poor management that really got me a lot of times. Broken equipment. Oh my gosh, it was nothing worse than having to go take pictures at a scene and have the camera not work. Excessive overtime. I can tell you during, we had a tornado that I worked 36 hours straight. Not good. Rotating shifts. You go from 12 to 8, 12 midnight to 8 in the morning, and then you go to 4 to 12. You don't help anybody there. So look at what those things are. And I can tell you that, your rotating shifts are really poor. It's low pay some areas. Support. Stress on police officers right now, I can tell you straight out because people do not support them. People do not believe there's good police officers out there, and there are great police officers out there. I can remember sitting with 5 police officers in the back of my station because we had to go to an accident that 5 teenagers died, and we had to do death notification to 5 families. The the toll that took was horrible. And I just want you to know that there are really good police officers out there, and nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop. There are good ones out there. I also want to tell you that it's a lie about divorces. This is the numbers on suicide. I'm going to give you this as well. I'm going to send this to you on this notice. On suicide, suicide is the #1 killer amongst police officers. Not in the line of death, it's suicide. Why? What's the stress level like? But here's something that is different than most people. Most people will say that police officers are divorced higher than most. Actually, the numbers are lower. They're much lower. Police, along with fire, have help out there. So I want you to know that there is help out there for people. And so that's important to know. The police want a marriage counselor got in and says, so often the media lies and has police officers out there having all these divorces and so much that it's not true. It is not true. So on that note, I'm going to close because I have 10 seconds, but I will attach these to the notice, and I wish you the best of luck. Call me if you need me. Thank you. Bye-bye.